Good morning. This House is now in session.
To lay the Rural Development Commission annual report for the year ended the 31st of March 2008.
Revert to government business.
Government business is now the order of the day. Prior to the suspension on Monday, this House has resolved itself into standing Finance Committee to debate the Appropriation Bill 2019 and the estimates. We now revert to those mentioned items.
Head 87, Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, in the amount of $309,930,509.
Technological and Vocational Training to join us in the WAP.
Request granted.
Thank you, ma'am.
We begin with the Honorable Minister. Please note again for our guests, the answers are to be limited to 5 minutes per question, and I will kindly ask you to give your name and announce your position on speaking. We begin with the Honorable Minister with her opening remarks, and
Thank
ask that
you.
you move the head at the end.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is indeed a pleasure this morning to be here in this estimates debate to address the country with respect to the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training. With me, I have the Chief Education Officer, Ms. Karen Bess, to my left. To my right is Ms. Janet Phillips, the Permanent Secretary. To the far right is the Parliamentary Secretary, Senator Dr. Ramel Springer. In the second row is the Deputy Chief Education Officer, Mrs. Joy Adams, Deputy Education Officer of Planning and Development, Dr. Roderick Rudder, Financial Controller, Ms. Jennifer Brooms, Director, Acting of Education Technical Management Unit, Mr. Richard Harrison. The third row comprises the Senior Psychologist, Mrs. Juanita Brathwaite Wharton, Education Officer in Business Studies, Ms. Yvette Eswick, Senior Education Officer, Ms. Janice Reed, and Director Acting of Information Technical Quality Assurance Unit, Mr. Junior Burgess. Allow me, ma'am, at the outset to crave your indulgence in just taking a few minutes to thank Barbadians of all walks of life, certainly for being able to permit me the opportunity during what I consider to be a very challenging time, having had a leave of absence in relation to seeking treatment overseas, to have the support of a country, certainly, and words of encouragement over the past few months. It is certainly testimony here today to the strength of Barbadians and the prayers of Barbadians that have certainly encouraged and held me up through a very difficult time. And apart from being here through the grace of God, I believe that I would want to, at the outset, thank the constituents of St. Michael Southeast who have been extremely patient in ensuring that through my challenge that they have certainly been extremely understanding in being able to appreciate that my absence sometimes did not really mean that I was not caring about them, but certainly that I had to deal with my own challenges at that point in time. Thankfully, I have had a team that has been able to address a number of their concerns through my father, who was a former representative, constituency assistant, through the assistance of my branch president and the executive, and certainly other supporters throughout the constituency. There are a number of people, both in big capacities and small capacities, who have made sure that those persons in the constituency of St. Michael Southeast have been well looked after, and to them I want to say thank you. Of particular thanks to Madam Chair is also my colleagues who have stood by me and who've made sure that even in absence that I have still been present by being able to make sure that those constituents have been able to have their needs addressed. And in particular, I want to thank Senator Lucille Moon, who has been the acting minister for the past few months as well, and who, although in the other place, has made sure as the acting minister in education that she's been able to address the needs of the wider nation on my behalf. Dr. Ramel Springer, Senator Dr. Ramel Springer, as well as the parliamentary secretary, has also been instrumental in the Ministry of Education in holding the fort, and I too am glad to have him here with me this morning. I want to also take a moment as well to thank the staff within the Ministry of Education, Ms. Karen Best, the Chief Education Officer, Ms. Jeanette Phillips, who have really, through this entire process, have been at the core of making sure that I had information always at the tip of my fingers, and certainly being able to allow me to still function on my good days, and even on my bad days. And to them, I really owe a deep sense of thanks and appreciation for holding my hand through a very difficult time. To all of the staff in the Ministry of Education, I must say, ma'am, that there have been times when we've had to meet on weekends, we've had to meet late afternoons, and regardless of the time that I have asked them to meet with me online, for the most part, they have risen to the occasion and have made sure that I've been kept abreast of what has been happening in the ministry. I want to specifically thank the two individuals, Junior Burgess and Chesterfield Marshall, ma'am, because they, through the use of technology, have been able to demonstrate that while a minister may not be on island, that there's still a role that can be played by being able to function through the available technology. And through video conferencing, we started, ma'am, with a small camera, and then we grew to audio equipment and me being able to see the entire room, so that, again, we could make full use of technology to be able to keep me in contact with the Ministry of Education. I was able to launch the School Music Festival online. Again, many people in Barbados cannot figure out whether I'm on island or I'm off island, because I continue to be in their living rooms repeatedly, and I have given a commitment to this country that regardless of whether I am sick or not or have challenges, that I love my country and I will do whatever it is that I can, particularly as Minister of Education, to be on the ground. Few more people, ma'am, and it is, I say at the outset that education requires this morning in my introduction, because unlike any other ministry, I have been off island, and therefore I owe it to the country to make them aware of the people who have brought me to this point today, to be able to sit here before you with the knowledge of the Ministry of Education and the interests of the people at heart. My personal assistant has been, Angela Canchon, has perhaps been a major driving force on the heels of both the Permanent Secretary and the Chief Education Officer, making sure, again, that I had whatever information was necessary to do the job and to make sure that things were followed through. To the principals, the heads of the various institutions, again, they have appreciated my vision for what is necessary in relation to the management of the various institutions, and certainly in relation to the boards that I have appointed them to sit and to lead. And I must tell you, ma'am, they've created a chat for the sharing of ideas. I believe it is the first one of its kind, but again, it allows me to be aware of what is happening at the various secondary institutions in particular. I had a rough patch at some points with the unions, and I appreciate how they have represented their base, and they have also understood in the same token, ma'am, the challenges that as minister I have come to office and I have found. And to them, I really appreciate that we've been able to move from a position of hostility to one where I think we are moving towards, working towards a common objective. And I believe that things can only get better. When I first started, it was a situation where when they came to the ministry to have meetings, they would sit across the floor from us as if a line was drawn in the sand. Today, I can proudly say that members of the union join us at the head table, and we sit as though we are part of a common objective to do the best that we can in education. Last but not least, or penultimate last, the media, because again, they have been keeping in contact with me. They have on occasion sought my opinion on various things that were happening in the country. And I believe that education has not for a long time taken the lead or had a voice in terms of what were the challenges that we were facing in education. But I believe that we've been able to speak to a number of those issues, and hopefully today we'll be able to clear up a number of the other misconceptions about what is happening in the Ministry of Education for the benefit of the entire public. So I begin my presentation, ma'am, this morning, recognizing too that the leader of the Barbados Labour Party and certainly leader of this country has again vested in me a huge responsibility, a ministry that is responsible for shaping the minds of the nation, for ensuring that we are able to give the best to our country and to our people, that we're able to ensure that education continues to play a pivotal role in shaping the type of Barbados that we want to see. And I thank her too for her patience in giving such a ministry to me, one that I know is her baby, one that she was very instrumental in shaping, and one that hopefully I will come to be regarded as one who has gone even beyond the achievements that the Honorable Mia Motley has brought to the fore in the landscape of education in this country. So I begin my presentation this morning, ma'am, Head 87, dealing with a budget that makes up about 309 million of the national budget. It encompasses over 60,000 students, crosses over 67 public primary schools, 12 public nursery schools, 36 registered private primary and nursery schools, 4 special needs units in the primary system and 4 private schools, 21 public secondary schools, 9 private schools offering secondary education, and at the tertiary level, the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill, Barbados Community College, Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute of Technology, 2 occupational training institutions, the Barbados Vocational Training Board and the Technical and Vocational Education and Training Council, TVET, which, as many of you would know, has only in this last financial year come under the Ministry of Education. The 1 teacher training college, which exists at Urdiston. We cover the school meals department, the student revolving loan fund, and I'm sure that many of you would realize the mammoth task that is therefore within the hands of the Minister of Education and certainly all of the staff in the Ministry of Education in respect of ensuring that a ministry that touches all of the lives of every Barbadian from the cradle to the grave basically is one that is able to function at its maximum capacity. Now, ma'am, one of the things that I believe the country responded to over the course of the past few days was a headline that spoke to me being interviewed and certainly addressing a number of the issues that I believe are plaguing us in education. And it spoke to a shake-up in education. Now, as I sit here this morning, ma'am, I lay all cards on the table because I personally believe that we are in a crisis in this country as it relates to education. I say crisis not as an admission that things cannot be fixed, but rather a call to action of a country to recognize that things have gone off track, and we as a country collectively, from ministry, teachers, principals, administrators, union officials, members of parliament, and students and parents have a role to play in getting this education system back on track. The Chief Education and I differ on that comment, but I know that I think we are both agreed that we have to recognize the problem and we have to be prepared to fix where things have gone off track. Madam Chair, I want to also acknowledge that there are deficits in the system. We speak a lot about deficits in relation to students and challenges that we have with students, and there are many, but we also have deficits in relation to our teachers. We have deficits in relation to our principals and leaders of the institutions. We have deficits in the Ministry of Education, and I myself may have some deficits, ma'am. But again, an acknowledgement that we have things that are going wrong or that we have things that we have to recognize need some attention is also the first place I believe that we have to start if we are going to fix it. The time has now come, ma'am, that we must find solutions. We must be able to not just identify challenges anymore, but we have to know, and I have challenged the members in the ministry, the officers in the ministry, to not tell me alone what the problems are, but to be very candid about the solutions. And so I have started on a shake-up, first of all, in the thinking within the Ministry of Education. And that thinking starts from a position that we have to find solutions. And that is why we are here today, ma'am. These estimates, unfortunately, are set against a background where financial circumstances have dealt us a bad hand, but I believe we have to play the hand that we've been dealt. And the conversation I've certainly had with the staff in the Ministry of Education is one which starts from a framework that we're not throwing anybody under the bus. We had an issue of leadership under the last administration. We had an issue of leadership within the Ministry of Education, and we have to now correct those deficiencies that all of us know where they would have gone off track. It means, therefore, that people have to be energized in order to be able to do their job. People have to feel as though things can be corrected and that those deficiencies that exist are going to be corrected in a timely manner, not just within the ministry, but across the system. We have to clean up the system as it relates to the reporting by principals of various institutions in relation to things that are happening and to be able to have quick action taken to address problems. We have to realize that even in relation to the issues of violence in schools, ma'am, that again, action needs to be taken. It can no longer be that we are only putting resources at the tertiary level, or significant resources, but we have to address the deficits as it relates to at the primary level. As we all know, if you don't have a good foundation, you're not going to be able to succeed at whatever you do. And I believe that perhaps we may not be able to do it fully this year with government resources, but certainly we've been leveraging a lot in relation to private resources through charities and various other organizations who have been assisting the Ministry of Education to help us with teacher training, to help us with making sure that we have the interventions that are necessary in relation to our students, that we allow our teachers to be trained to enable them to be able to deal with issues within the classroom. And ma'am, the reality is that a number of these deficits have gone on for decades. And these deficits now are manifesting themselves in a number of ways across the system. I know yesterday when the Attorney General was here, there was reference to certain secondary schools having certain types of students, and as a consequence, the level of violence and the statistics are showing that certain students are finding their way before the criminal justice system. Ma'am, this is not by chance. I believe it is something that in the ministry we acknowledge is a major concern, and it means that we have to correct the deficits from the primary level, because if we fail to address the issues of numeracy, literacy, behavioral problems within the classroom, fail to address the issues of classroom management, ensuring that when you do criterion reference tests at 7 and 9, that those deficits are corrected, ma'am, we will see when you reach the 11+ exam that you will find students falling through the cracks and being unable to cope. That is the reality of the situation. And I want to give the country the assurance that those issues will be addressed by this administration. The common entrance exam is under review. The methods through which you reach the common entrance exam in terms of the criterion reference tests are also being reviewed by this current ministry as well, because we recognize that perhaps enough is not known in relation to what these tests mean to parents and certainly to students, and we have to tighten the mechanism by which we are assessing our students. It also means, ma'am, that there are going to have to be additional resources being allotted to the Ministry of Education in relation to testing, psychological testing, because we're seeing that manifesting itself more and more. The mechanisms for dealing with children at risk have to be strengthened. We have guidance counselors in our institutions, but they need additional resources in order to be able to maximize their full potential to be able to help our young people in the system as well. So across the board, ma'am, those are some of the major challenges that need to be corrected. And of course, the most plaguing problem perhaps is creating a safe environment, both in terms of the physical plant, but also in terms of the environmental challenges that are facing, I believe, every single institution across this country. Just last night, I'm mindful that there was a story that parents were protesting this morning at the Milton Lynch Primary School. Ma'am, you can replicate every single day an issue in relation to environmental issues across this country. I have remarked to the Prime Minister that it is a burning issue for me. I have alluded to the fact that we have inherited one issue in relation to the South Coast sewage plant on the South Coast, but truthfully across our schools, the issues are almost as though we are seeing a breakdown of that type of scenario across every institution. And unfortunately, it is not that we in the ministry do not appreciate and understand the concerns that students, parents, principals, administrators, and the environments that they have to work in. But truthfully, there is really not enough money to fix all of the issues that are presenting themselves all at the same time. What I give the assurance to the country, however, though, in relation to the shake-up I am speaking about, is a shake-up that allows us to identify the problems across the system, to be able to ensure that we put proper maintenance programs which were not existing before in place, that we reorganize the department presently that addresses the environmental problems, the Education Technical Management Unit, because I believe that that has been a challenge in relation to how we have been able to address the problems in an efficient manner and in an urgent manner, ma'am. And I think that to do justice to the concerns that people across the country have, we have to take control now of the way in which we maintain our schools. We have seen some changes in relation to maintenance already. I have certainly started to work with the member for St. Michael East in relation to recognizing that the Ministry of Education does not have the resources to be able to address certainly the exterior of the school plants, and to try to work with him with his limited budget to be able to have a portion of that budget allocated to ensuring that we can address the problems of rodents and monkeys and cockroaches and all of the other rodents that we see manifesting themselves that are impacting on the school environment. Ma'am, this is a serious, serious problem that is facing the ministry, and no, I believe no amount of resources that we have right now will be able to address them in this financial year. But I do feel that I have to let the country know that this is a call as well at this juncture for private sector engagement and involvement. It is a call to parents to get involved in the institutions in which your children are in, because when we can do better, we will do better. But there are difficult times, and I know, ma'am, that even yourself, you have tried your best to do things within these schools, within your constituency, and certainly where your daughter attends. But I have encouraged all of my colleagues to do the same, because these are trying times, and we all know the financial situation that presents itself right now, ma'am. But we have to be mindful that it is only by having all hands on deck at this juncture that we're going to be able to see a change. That, ma'am, apart from the issues that we need to address in the deficits and certainly in the maintenance, I am pleased to be able to speak as well to the issue in education as it relates to skills and having a curriculum that is not focused any longer specifically on academics alone. It will require significant resources as well to ensure that our institutions who are now providing alternate forms of testing have the resources to be able to allow some of the students who are not academically inclined to be able to excel in the area of vocational and technical training. That also will require assistance from the private sector to be able to get involved, because the workforce that we want actually starts from within the school environment, and therefore it is imperative on persons who recognize that there are deficiencies in persons coming out of the educational system into the work environment to get involved, not just be critical, but also to get involved in playing a significant role in relation to helping us to improve the school plan. So, ma'am, I know you are looking at me and you're about to tell me that in the interest of time I need to wrap up, but I just want to say that we have, as a government, we have indicated certain priorities in relation to education. The introduction of languages is high on the priority in relation to revamping the system that currently exists. Our mission is to make sure that all students from the primary level are able to certainly be able to conversate in Spanish. I've said it in this chamber before. I learned Spanish at secondary school, but I can perhaps better read it than I can write it than I can speak it. And I think that we have to address these deficiencies. I do, and I'm confident within the ministry that we have persons who are capable of helping us to address the curriculum deficits, but we have to now make it more relevant to the students that we have and be able to use the technology that is available to reach the students across the system as well. So, ma'am, I am again pleased to be here this morning, and I look forward to this process, which when I was on the other side, I certainly made plenty comments relating to improvements in the parliamentary process and making it more relevant to the people and being able to let people see what we are doing in this chamber so that they're aware of what is happening in relation to the Parliament of Barbados and the decisions that are being made here. So I know that my members are certainly, my officers are certainly pleased to be here to answer the questions of this very important ministry and to certainly allay some of the concerns and the fears that many of you may have in relation to what is transpiring across the education system. Thank you, ma'am.
Could kindly move the head, Minister? Just to move the head. Move the head. Move the head, not your head.
Oh, ma'am, I beg to move that head 87 do now stand part.
We move on to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, ma'am, and good morning to all. And let me take a moment at the outset sincerely to compliment and to offer commendation to the Honorable Minister, who, in spite of her personal challenges, as she's admitted, has demonstrated a high level of devotion to duty and to the Barbados cause, with particular reference to education, by staying so closely connected with the program of government and the goings-on under that ministry, and of course by being present here today with her team. I thank God for his sustained hand upon her and continue to keep her in my prayers. Welcome her team here today as well, and want to express appreciation to them for being so willing to come to interact with us over this very important matter. The annual estimates debate, ma'am, normally would provide a significant opportunity for a minister to outlay his or her vision for that ministry and to set it in the context of our developmental goals and aspirations as a country. One of the evident deficiencies of the current format, and it's not in the format itself, is probably more so to be understood with reference to how we have conducted ourselves under this format, is that much time has been used in addressing to ministers questions and issues relative to some of the more mundane constituency level interests. And I'm not saying the opportunity should not have been used to ask questions with reference to your constituency or to put those matters to the ministry. But certainly there's been a little bit of over-reference to some of the more mundane things. And I trust that with a ministry such as education, more opportunity will be given to the minister to express herself, the minister and her team, to express that larger and bigger vision for education for Barbados, and to show us how this vision is reflected in the numbers of these estimates. There are a few things which I hope she will be able to address and substantially address. One has to do with the matter of specialization at the level of our secondary school institutions. I firmly, strongly believe, and I've said it multiple times, we need to move away from this archaic system and structure within which we have pursued educational goals historically. I believe it is largely discriminatory, it is damning, it conduces to failure, and it perhaps unintentionally commits hordes and multitudes of our young ones to go down a road of failure, which ultimately end in their being corralled in a context of despair and hopelessness. So I'd like to hear her on the matter of specialization. I think that we continue to stifle the natural inclinations of our young people, and to herd them down that path, which leads over time to nowhere, is not what Barbados wants to be investing its money in 2019, 2020, and beyond. I have heard the minister recently as well spend some time addressing the matter of the issue of the failure rate, again at the secondary level. It'll be interesting to hear what efforts are to be made to address that problem, where we invest so much money, the outturn of which, as represented in the statistics of failure, does not leave us satisfied that we have wisely invested in education. I often say we have wisely invested in education, but we have not invested wisely in education, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So the business of the failure rate has to be addressed at some point, and I hope that there is some evidence in these estimates that that is a priority concern for the minister and her team. I also hope that we will see in these estimates the platform which is being constructed, the structure which is being created for strategically tackling the issues of bullying and violence in the school system. I really fear very much the day when we come upon a greater tragedy than already we have seen as a result of violence and bullying in our school system. I think it's a very big problem. It is reflective of that wider problem of a breakdown of law and order in Barbadian society, of which we spoke a couple of days ago. And I think much of the money now being invested in education, unfortunately, must ensure that there's some directed towards addressing this problem of school violence and bullying among our young student population. And we have to address that strategically, not in a piecemeal fashion, but certainly in a robust way that yields the results that we seek, and yields those results quickly before we enter in upon an even darker period of time in our development as a country. I have a problem with the issue of transportation with reference to moving our student population to and from school. The last administration chose to subsidize transportation for school students. That was a controversial issue then. That is not the point I raise now. The point I raise is that if we are going to provide a subsidy for transport, we fail unless we provide the transport. And we have a problem that needs to be addressed somewhere between the Ministry of Finance, or among the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Public Works and Transport, the Ministry of Education. This thing must be addressed. I was on my way to Parliament a few weeks ago. And surprisingly, Madam Chair, I was hailed by a group of school children on Tweed Side Road. And they hailed me to represent to me the fact that they had been waiting hours for the bus to get to school. I think they said as early as 6:15. I was on my way to Parliament, ma'am, so it was minutes to 10. And this multitude of, and you see it every day. Saw it just this week, And scores and scores of school children on the streets on mornings at a very late hour. And then when they do ultimately arrive at this institution, which they're being tutored, I know in instances of some schools, there must be a process gone through before they can actually enter into the classroom. I know checks are being made for weapons and other items not allowed in school, and there's a procedure to be gone through. So that's a further delay. Ma'am, at the end of the day, how are those minds and spirits settled for a day of learning? And I think we are failing ourselves as a nation in this seemingly simple way, but in a very serious way, we're failing our school children if we can't get them to school and back in good time. I believe perhaps we need to look at a change in the hours and a change in the timetabling that would facilitate those hours, even if it's a shorter school day. I believe we need, in the current circumstances, if it is only for the time being while we sort out our transport problems, that we ensure that there's no competition for places on the public transport system between our student population and our working population and other people who are commuting back and forth to various places of interest. It will require, I believe, maybe for the time being, until we get that sorted, a change in the schedules, both with respect to the school hours and the timetabling, or maybe, ma'am, a proper partnership formed with the PSVs or tour companies. But we have to get our young children off the street and into school, else it's just money being wasted and lives being seriously affected, and negatively so. The last thing I'd want to mention, ma'am, is with reference to the relationship between the ministry and our tertiary level institution, particularly so the UWI. This government commendably has reinforced its view that we must subsidize tuition costs at the KFL campus. I have always supported that, and I still do. And my question really has to do with the nature of the relationship beyond a funding subsidy. What level of moral suasion, what level of influence, what level of pressure is brought to bear by the ministry upon the university administration to ensure that what they offer up there is more in sync with our developmental goals. I have heard the Honorable Prime Minister refer to it myself. I have spoken about it several times. But one of the darker evils arising in Barbados in the last 10, 12, 13, 15 years is a specter of young people graduating from our university who remain unemployable because they perhaps are not properly skilled. That which they pursued as a course orientation at the university did not fully and properly fit them for the context to be found by them in terms of our developmental goals and the work opportunities provided outside the walls of the university. I think there must be greater synchronization, and I wonder if any at all pressure or suasion is brought to bear upon the university authority to address that situation. I'll retain my other comments, ma'am, perhaps for later. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. I want to start perhaps where you ended and to assure you that in relation to our communication with the University of the West Indies, it is a good one. From early on in certainly my tenure, we had discussions relating to exactly what you speak about, ensuring that the university's programs that are offered are consistent with the areas that we consider to be areas of national development. Now, I must tell you that I've gone one step further and engaged the Urdistan Training College in relation to even the programs that have been offered there as well, because I believe that we have to recognize that instead of taking an approach that our teachers should only, for instance, go into areas such as special needs if they decide to pursue that area, that really all teachers should be trained in the area of special needs. So again, it has been a call for a different approach to make the institutions that directly impact on the Ministry of Education's work, that they are in tune with the vision that we have, that if they have to tailor programs specifically to ensure that it meets the requirements that we have, that they do so in discussions with us. Up to Friday, we were in a discussion with Urdistan Training College, for instance, regarding the issue of literacy and the issue of reading. They're coming on board shortly with a program to have a literacy center where teachers will be trained, and in turn they will then be able to test students and to be able to pass on that knowledge. And each year teachers will be trained in the area of literacy, because I think we all appreciate that that is a substantial area right now that a number of the deficits are being highlighted. So both in relation to that institution, in relation to the university, we have been having those discussions. I know we also did a presentation in relation to a number of areas, for instance, the blue economy, where they're offering programs there to address the government's new ministries and to ensure that students have the opportunity to pursue areas that traditionally they would not have pursued. Also in the area of cultural studies and also in the area of the event management and stuff, I think they've been in discussions too with the Minister of Culture, because we have recognized that a number of the interest areas were not being provided. And I think they also recognize it, but I do feel more comfortable that there's now a better marriage and a better understanding of the vision that UE must play in the whole scheme of being able to achieve our vision. I do recognize that I came to the Ministry of Education and there were more concerns initially about what monies were owed to the University of the West Indies. And again, I was able to take the conversation to a different level, because I too, like you, share the view that they play a pivotal role in the end result of our education system. So they must be engaged so that they know what skills and what practical requirements we have as a government as well. In relation to the issue of transportation, I think the member for Christchurch West has heard me repeatedly in relation to this issue. I have schools in particularly the country areas where we are finding our students getting to school at 11:30, 12:30 in some cases. In some cases, they may not even make it to school. It is a huge challenge for the ministry because it is one thing to speak of the conditions within the school environment, but it's another thing to not even be able to get the children to the institution. And so that has presented a challenge for me and within the ministry, because we have school attendance officers who are constantly trying to track down the students. I've even seen these suspensions. Sometimes it is by principals for lateness, habitual lateness. In some cases, it may be because students didn't want to go to school or get there on time, but in a lot of cases, we are finding that it is as a result of the transportation system not being adequate to get the students to the institutions. So I share your concerns, and it is one that I have spoken to the minister about. Again, I'm sure you are no stranger to the information that we would have had before the campaign, and certainly you're no stranger to the truth now in relation to the issue of buses that were promised that were not ordered, or wherever those funds were diverted. We will hopefully in due course come to find out. But one of the difficulties is that we've ordered the buses, and hopefully within the next few months we will be in a position to add to the existing complement to address some of those problems. I have put on the table to the minister the option that you suggested in relation to engaging private contractors to assist us in particular in getting students to these schools. One of the challenges I gather is an issue of cost, and I believe they're doing the rationalization to determine how cost effective it will be for those types of short trips, because obviously you appreciate the person has to do the trip in the morning, return back to the pickup point, and then come back in the afternoon. So the question of what they do in between in terms of if it's cost effective, if they have other routes to do, or if they have other jobs to do, is something that I know the Minister of Transport and Works has spoken to me that he is looking into. That would have come out of a discussion when we would have brought Ross University to Barbados, where, as you would be aware, the co-op that was formed has been now providing the transportation services to and from the Sherburne Conference Center for students. And I felt that a similar framework could be used certainly to engage a number of the operators who the last administration would have given several licenses to in the system that perhaps in some cases they're not able to fully operate on the bus routes, and would also solve the problem of the ministry in getting our students to these institutions. But it is something, honourable member, that we are very, very, very concerned about, and as I said, I'm awaiting certainly the supply of the buses, but also further word from the Ministry of Transport and Works in relation to how possible it is to engage, even if it's for a short time, those operators who may be willing to be able to participate in such a program. I think the cost effectiveness of it has to be examined as to whether we are losing more in terms of our spend on education, where the education is provided for the student, but the student is not able to get there, versus having a situation where we may have to spend a little bit more in terms of our operators to get them there. So I believe, as you would appreciate, I cannot on my own make the determination in what transport does, but certainly I have made the representations to the minister, and so long as resources, I believe, are available, we should be able to address that problem. As it relates to bullying, there was a program in place before I became minister, the anti-violence campaign that had been started in the early phases before I came in, and I would have worked with the team, with UNICEF and the ministry, to be able to engage a number of artists from the industry to be able to go into the schools, to speak in a language to young people that they can understand, to discourage them from engaging in violent activities, in particular bullying. There are other phases to the campaign, and I want to take the opportunity to thank UNICEF for their assistance to the Ministry of Education to date. There are a lot of projects that the ministry has been able to do only because of the assistance of partners such as UNICEF and others, and those partners have allowed us to, I believe, fulfill the vision that we have in relation to this issue. Now, bullying is a major problem. It is at the root of a number of issues in the system. But the wider issue, I believe, is that we have to ensure that teachers are also able to address the issues of conflict resolution. And whether that happens within the the formal curriculum or whether they are equipped through teacher training to recognize the challenges sometimes that often emanate within the school environment, and then we see them depicted in the van stand or the bus stand or after school, to be able to assist young people to find better ways of resolving conflict. Now, we will continue the program in relation to the anti-violence campaign with additional resources from UNICEF this year. It involves also a component to teach the parents as well as the teachers to be able to deal with those issues. So the first part was really to create the awareness. We have certainly seen a reduction in the numbers coming out of that particular campaign. I know UNICEF is very happy with the work that was done, and that work will continue because I don't believe that we can do it for a few weeks of the year and then we drop the ball. It is something that we have to continue to emphasize and re-emphasize in relation to our students. The fact is that a lot of our students are being influenced not just by messages in media, but also in music in relation to how to deal with anger and how to resolve conflict. So I must tell you that we are trying our best to grapple with these issues within education. Again, bullying can be very disruptive to a student's life and will impact on its ability to complete his or her education. And so we have to do whatever we can as a ministry to ensure that we have those programs in place. We've also looked at things like the school positive behavior management program, where we have been training our teachers as well to look at alternate forms of discipline. Because there's certainly a correlation between how we discipline our young people and certainly how they respond as well when they are faced with situations that may lead them to result in a violent way. And I say that because a lot of this violent activity sometimes are things that they have seen, it's sometimes things that are emanated in a home, and then it is manifested certainly in the school environment as well. So given that teachers and principals spend a lot of time during the day with our students, it is important that they're equipped to recognize any aspects of bullying and to also be able to deal with issues of conflict resolution. The other thing, honorable member, is that there is a program in some of our secondary schools which specifically targets these issues of bullying and tries to address it. One that is in a number, I think it's about 7 schools, secondary mainly, and I think 1 or 2 primary schools as well. The Supreme Counseling Program that also addresses the issue of conflicts with parents as well, and has tried to get at the root of the causes for student behavior. A lot of this behavior is as a result sometimes too of learning difficulties. Sometimes students are not coping well in school, and then they tend to act out as well to bully younger students or even bully older students depending on their size. And so again, we have to be able to equip ourselves with persons within the institution to recognize it. Now, the Supreme Counseling Program, we had discussions recently about this. They are proposing to us a system through which students can report acts of bullying as well as the general public through the use of smartphones. The challenge for us is that we have to now make sure that these various schools, we're starting with a number of the pilot project first of all, where we will ensure that we have Wi-Fi compatibility across these institutions. And that would enable students to be able to go onto an app on their phone or even report it from home, any incidences where they have identified bullying taking place. Now, that may deal with not the act itself taking place, but it may deal with the lead up to the act taking place, where people are able to report what they are seeing or repeated acts of behavior that are of a negative nature. And so we have met with them. We are working towards getting the Wi-Fi compatibility to ensure that, again, we place a tool within the hands of our students, but also in the hands of persons who may see these acts in motion and have them be in a position to report them. And I just will share this with you. It would allow you to indicate the institution. It would allow you to indicate, if you are aware of the name of the student, allow you to indicate the name of the student. And the intention is that apart from training a teacher within the institution to assist with this program, you would also maybe have a center where the calls are taken and the information is taken in electronically, and then persons can respond to the issues and the incidences that have presented themselves. So we are, as I said, taking steps to reduce this challenge that is facing us across the system. As it relates to your first question in relation to the specialization of schools, yes, that was a manifesto promise that we had made, that we would look at the specialization of schools, and already we've started discussions with a few individuals relating to creating a center for not just music excellence, but also in the performing arts, but also in relation to sports as well. I know we are in the process of looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the various institutions, because as you would appreciate, there are some schools that are known for sciences, there are some schools that are known for the arts, and it is really a case of carrying out the audit to determine what are the better programs to be able to place within those institutions. But it is still high priority on the agenda of the Ministry of Education, and hopefully within the next few months we will be able to start to roll out those specialty schools across the island.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to the Honourable Minister of Education and her team. I commend you, Minister, for your bravery, your resolve and resolute nature to continue with your national service to this country that you love so dearly. You have shown tremendous commitment and dedication in spite of your personal challenges to still keep on top of your ministry, to be here today, to be with us, and you know that you have all of our goodwill, and God's blessings continue to be with you. First, I want to address, Minister, the area of curriculum reform. As you are fully aware, we have not had curriculum reform in this country since the year 2001, start of this century, when the now Honourable Prime Minister was in the position you are now in, and the Honourable Member for St. Thomas here to my right was Parliamentary Secretary in the ministry. And I certainly believe that it is an area that we need to look at after 2 decades. You know, the world has changed so much in terms of information, technology, etc. You yourself said, Minister, that you know, the area of education is in need of reform. I think most of us would agree that we need to instill more civic mindedness in our youth in terms of their education and team building, conflict resolution, issues and skills have to be probably imparted in them more and more. And those kind of issues, we need to develop a society and a young people that are probably more entrepreneurial, because it is clearly shown that government can't employ everyone. I mean, those who come out of university with a management degree should perhaps be able to start their own businesses, their own enterprises, and employ others, employ their families, employ people within their communities, and build capacity from the community level up to the national level, rather than feel that the government at that stage, having carried them through the first 21 plus years of their life, still needs to carry them through in terms of finding a job. And all of this has to start with the curriculum at our primary school level, then going on to our secondary school level. So having said all of that, Minister, I'm just wondering if your ministry has plans to reform the curricula at our schools, whether primary or secondary schools, and and beyond.
Thank you for those comments. Let me just tell you that curriculum reform for me is a high priority. I have here the Curriculum 2000 Barbados document of which you speak. I must tell you that this, along with the white paper on education from 1995, speaks to a number of things in relation to curriculum reform that this country should have advanced, I believe, with greater speed than it has done so over the last few decades. I believe the challenge has certainly come in relation to the number of subjects that you can get into the normal school day. I also believe the challenge has come in relation to the fact that sometimes we have people who are officers who can identify ways to change the system, but sometimes leadership may not have been as willing to be able to effect those changes. I take the view, like the Prime Minister, that time has come where, having educated a nation of persons who have rather received scholarships or exhibitions or who've done master's degrees, that we now have to utilize the services of the people who we've spent considerable money on. And therefore, I can tell you, I've started in the ministry in looking certainly at the fact that we have a number of teachers who are generalists and not specialists, certainly at the primary level, and in relation to certainly having persons who, if we're going to, first of all, create a culture where we change thinking towards, even if it is the arts or to the other academic subjects, we have to have people who, from foundation up, know what they are doing, and therefore we shouldn't wait until a child reaches secondary school to now be introducing them to instruments, larger instruments. We should be doing it from the primary school level. So it means that there has to be a shift in the types of individuals that we place within the primary school curriculum, first of all, and in turn we are seeing at the secondary school level that sometimes you have square pegs and round holes as well. You have persons who, when you check the qualifications, may have excelled in the sciences, but they may be teaching languages, for argument's sake. And as a consequence, these are some of the issues in terms of reform, because you now have to revisit what we have and be able to get persons who can teach some of the same subjects that you speak of, getting them also doing some of the areas that are certainly necessary. In terms of entrepreneurship, we've seen a lot of the partnerships taking place with entities like the Entrepreneurship Hub. There are a couple of private businesses that have been involved in activities within the schools. Again, everything is not going to be able to happen within the curriculum during the day, but there are things I believe that we are starting to see emerging by partnering with some of these organizations to change the way in which our curriculum looks, and certainly our extracurricular activities as well. But in terms of our course content, I think the biggest criticism has been that the content, when you come out of school, you're not able to apply what you have learned. And I think all of us are victims of that in one form or the other. And I think that time has now come where we revisit what we are teaching our students, whether it is relevant to them when they leave school. And it is a challenge I've made certainly to the principals of the various institutions, requesting of them to look at the types of students that they have and be able to tailor the curriculum to meet the needs of the various students that are in the school. If you know that your students are not necessarily academic and you need to institute a program from the first format, secondary for instance, where you need to have a special needs unit, then those are the resources that need to be directed into the institution. A allow the students to be able to improve in their literacy and their numeracy, so that they're in a position to take advantage of skills. But it requires strong leadership of institutions. And when I spoke of deficits in my introduction, it was really to highlight that some of our deficits also come in relation to leadership and people taking charge of the institutions that they run. There's no point following a curriculum that is highly academic when you know from the beginning that your students are not going to be able to accomplish the curriculum. And therefore, those are conversations that heads of the institutions need to be having with the ministry as well, and we are having with them in relation to how to make that shift and to make that change. We've started to introduce the CVQs, which again has been well received across a number of the schools at the secondary level. It has given a number of students the opportunity, again, not to follow the traditional academic subjects, but to go into the area of technical and vocational training from a young age. And we're seeing that at both the older and the newer secondary schools being very receptive. What, however, is a constraint to be able to make more of that happen again is costs, because a number of the institutions have to have workshops that are equipped to be able to deliver the instruction that is necessary. So while we speak of skills being more implemented in the schools, the call is still being made, and the challenge that we are having is being able to deliver some of the courses of instruction that are required given the limited resources that we have. And hence the reason why we have to move towards specialized schools where maybe some of the resources can be placed in 1 or 2 institutions as opposed to trying to spread it across 23. And those are a rationalization process that is taking place now to determine how do we best spend the resources and the monies that we have in order to be most effective with the delivery of instruction. But I must tell you that I think we've seen a decline in some ways in relation to the extracurricular activities that are afforded to students to do things like the entrepreneurship and these other areas outside of the curriculum. We need to find ways now to be able to integrate them into the curriculum as well. And I think most of you know my thrust for the arts. I have made the call repeatedly for us to put the arts in the same on the same level as the academics. We have tremendous talent across this country that has been untapped, and we need to not have dancing and drama and theater arts as something that is the extracurricular activity, but recognize that some of the best students are well-rounded by having not only a good understanding of the academics, but also being creative. And so the thrust that now needs to take place is one where we find a way within the curriculum to apportion adequate attention to the priority areas. We can't be speaking of languages and not have the subjects being rostered accordingly to give the adequate timing on the table for those subjects. We can't be speaking about a country investing in the creative arts and not have the adequate attention being paid within the curriculum to the arts as well. So I agree with you, Minister, that those are things that are of concern certainly to, I think, all of us, but we have to make those adjustments in relation to each of the institutions to be able to feed that information to the heads of the institutions who timetable, and for us to be able to have the oversight to ensure that they are doing what the ministry's vision is in relation to these areas.
Chair, with your leave, of course, just like to ask 2 supplementaries focusing on specific areas of or categories of students. Minister, the bullet 3 of your ministry's strategic goals speaks to providing special educational facilities for the disadvantaged to enable them to lead full, active, and interesting lives. And the first bullet, as it of course should do, speaks to providing high-quality, sound basic education at all levels of education to every citizen to equip them to recognize and realize their potential for development. My area on this particular point relates to education for children with disabilities. We have come far away in that, but we still need to ensure that these children can realize their full potential for development. A child that may be visually impaired, but of course their brain is unaffected, and in many cases they have more intellect than people with children with full visual capacity. And I'm just wondering, we have, of course, a lot of special interest schools.
Your question, honourable member? Your time is running out.
Yeah, sorry. And I'm just wondering what plans and goals your ministry has in terms of developing education for children with disabilities so that they can more realize their full potential.
Thank you, Minister. You know, I have two institutions in my constituency that address special needs, the Irving Wilson and the Iron Hills School. I'm very passionate about the area, both in relation to children with disabilities, also special needs generally, children across the spectrum who, for one reason or the other, are not achieving their full potential because either there's a lack of recognition as to how to integrate them into the curriculum or how to be able to give them the tools in which to learn. Recently, we would have established a committee within the ministry to look at a special needs policy. I must tell you that the special needs policy has been in many different forms over the course of the last 2 decades. We have implemented aspects of the policy in different ways in relation to the establishment of institutions, in relation to the training of teachers, in relation to the expansion of facilities that would accommodate persons with disabilities and special needs. But I believe that the time has now come to, as a country, be able to say to the world that Barbados has a special needs policy upon which it is guided. And I have introduced an element into the committee which now comprises of psychologists, academics, practitioners, data analysts, planning and research within the Ministry of Education, to be able to inform and to guide a lot of the ad hoc ways in which we have been addressing this issue. We would have spoken recently on the issue of ensuring that children who learn differently may be able to stay at home if they have a disability and have instruction to be delivered to them through the use of technology from within their home. We've spoken to the issue as well as of improving facilities so that children are comfortable in the environment in which they are learning. And again, with the appropriate resources, obviously we can do more, but I must assure you that it is high priority for me, and certainly for this ministry at this point in time. I do not believe that we can continue to speak of, education mattering for all students and not have an education policy and a framework that is inclusive of all persons. So we have to find ways to be able to administer our lessons to students who may not be able to come into the physical environment, but equally the ones who are there, we have a responsibility to them to make sure that they are given the best level of instruction while they are there as well. Because while we speak of the students who fall through the cracks in the mainstream system, there are many of them who fall through the cracks as well because they are classified as special needs or have a disability. I must tell you that during this time where I've had a little extra time to go online and watch things that I wouldn't necessarily watch, I've encountered a number of videos online of persons who have disabilities who have been able to achieve tremendous things in life. And I have been even more engaged and empowered to make sure that their stories are told in Barbados. I think we have had a situation where we've hidden a number of our people and our children with disabilities. They're shut away in homes. Again, if unless somebody highlights the issue, we are not aware of the challenges that they're facing. So they're in our society, but oftentimes not integrated in our society. And I believe we have to start to tell their story so that they're included in, for instance, our music festival, which is coming up shortly. that they're included in other activities in terms of things that the ministry is doing, and whether in culture or in academics. I was fortunate a few years ago to have the president of the Senate, who is visually impaired, preside over a Senate chamber, and unless you knew that she was visually impaired, you just wouldn't know. But she did so with such grace and confidence that it certainly inspired me and made me even realize even more that we have a responsibility to take care of all persons, and not just persons who we class as normal, but to recognize that all persons deserve the opportunity to participate fully in education. I just want to tell you that even things like extra time in exams, once persons are identified as having challenges, we have as a Ministry of Education to recognize that people learn differently, and some people require more time in an examination than others, and we have to afford those privileges to those persons. If they need readers or writers, we need to be able to afford those opportunities. Again, we may not have the full resources to be able to do so, but I think we have to start to change the way in which people view persons, certainly with disabilities, or persons who are on the spectrum, whether suffering with different varying levels of autism, or who are, Asperger's syndrome individuals, or physical or other mental challenges.
And Chair, my final supplementary deals with the education of the residents of the government industrial schools. At any given time, you would probably have around 60 girls and boys, teenagers, who unfortunately find themselves at a government industrial school because of the fact that they've come into conflict with the juvenile justice system. As you're aware, we're looking at reforming that system and, giving them a second chance in life. But there will still obviously be some who would end up in some form of detention. And I'm wondering what plans, of course, the government industrial school falls under my Ministry of Home Affairs. And I'm wondering what plans or strategies do you have that we can go forward in terms of giving the residents of the government industrial school better quality education while they're there. We know that there are limitations in their education at present, but we owe it to them as a country, as a government, to find ways to give them a second chance, and that has to be partly in terms of the higher quality of their education. Could you speak more on that particular issue?
Minister, and I know that you are being premature because you know that you sent us a paper in the ministry to review and also to meet with you later this week on. So I will share some of those thoughts in anticipation of that meeting. The government industrial school would have fallen under the Ministry of Education several years ago. I'm not sure of the genesis of why it would have been moved out of the ministry. I assume it was treated as a more correctional facility, and therefore that may have been a motivation. For me, the mission of education right now has to be one of reducing the number of entrants into the government industrial school and being able to test students or identify students who may have difficulties which may lead them to enter the juvenile justice system at an early age, and being able to get them assessed and treated to be able to deal with those challenges that they may be facing. That said, and that I believe is both the short, the medium term, and the long term mission. The students and the young people that you have in the institution presently, I agree with you, they deserve the opportunity to continue their education. I mean, even in the normal prison system, persons are still allowed to be able to pursue academics as well, and to be able to reform their lives. I think that you've also alluded, I think, in the report to the fact that a number of the individuals entering the institution also present with a number of numeracy and literacy deficits, which again, is something that we have to correct as a matter of urgency within the primary and the secondary school system so that we can see that reduction. But for the ones that are there, and I think this is where the challenge comes for the Ministry of Education, it is really down to resources, because we know we'll have to, based on what you have presented to us, seek to find those resources. And I have my PS here, who really is the holder of the purse string in relation to whether we can dedicate those resources and in what manner we're going to be able to dedicate the resources to assist with the continued education of those individuals, because I believe that will come with it some challenges in relation to the number of teachers that you would wish to have engaged in the institution, because they're not going to be able to leave to come to mainstream schools to do it, so it will mean a dedicated cadre of individuals in the institution to be able to assist with a program. And so I look forward to our meeting so that we can certainly flesh out the challenges, but also find some of the solutions in order to be able to address it. It may be that we may have to have maybe contract individuals to be able to do the programs, identify the type of programs that may be of interest to the students. But I think we have to start with addressing the deficits. I think if we address the deficits, it gives persons the opportunity to be more confident in terms of what areas they wish to pursue. But this is the same issue that we're seeing taking place across the secondary school system. We have to address deficits when people have passed through criterion reference tests and these areas have gone unnoticed and enter secondary school, and then they go on, in some cases, to become engaged in criminal activity and end up in the government industrial school or on to the prison at Dodds. So I would say that we can commit to assisting with a program that will address those initial deficits, but we will have to have further discussions in relation to how we deal with other areas that may be of interest to the students. There.
Thank you. Before we move on, I know the Honourable Leader of the Opposition sort of alluded to it, and you did too. I have a constituent, just one, really two, but one is very important, that I've been trying since the new term to get on the bus. I know it falls partly under the purview of the Minister of Transport, on the bus to get him to Irving Wilson School. Up to now, they keep saying the bus is full. Is there an alternative for these students? He's missed a lot of the term already.
Well, you're now bringing it to my attention, and I really want both yourself, my colleagues, and the country to know that I can respond only to things that are within my purview, and certainly things that come to my attention quickly. I have certainly tried to do that with all other incidences which have been reported to me, and I think this is no different. So I would hope, Madam Chair, that you would share the information with me out of this chamber so that I can look into it, because again, no child should be denied the opportunity to attend an educational institution. And if the issue is that the bus is full, I'm pretty sure that we can find alternate accommodation. The thing is, the question for me though is whether there are other students who are facing the same challenges, or other families who have not had a voice to be able to raise these issues. And I think that the call to the nation is, if you believe that there are other persons who are being denied the opportunity to have an education, then you need to let us know within the ministry.
Okay, just of note, I did let your ministry know.
Okay.
It just somehow never got to you. But let's move on. The Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to bring to your attention that my tank card is going to stay up because I have several questions, this being just the first. First, let me say that I am thrilled to see you, Minister, through you, Chair, back in this honorable chamber. And I also believe that the children of Barbados and the education sector are privileged, as you have the honor to represent them, that they have the honor to be led by you, and we really have great, wonderful expectations of you in leading this sector. Now, over the last few days of these estimates, there are a number of things that have come to light in terms of the lack of efficiency, I will be generous in using that term, with respect to the execution of resources. We heard from the Ministry of Innovation and Smart Technology about the $4 million that was wasted with respect to the digital ID cards. I myself spoke to the matter of the electronic single window and the fact that we are still repaying a US $5 million loan for a facility that still does not work. My question relates to your program 271 in the estimates, subprogram 310, which relates to a CDB project, School Plant Enhancement and Refurbishment Program, as well as subprogram 280, the Skills for the Future IDB program. And really just to use these as the platform for the question that I am about to ask. The CDB-funded Education Sector Enhancement Program was signed in 2012. The project was supposed to deliver major infrastructure works and refurbishment that we all in this country know are key right now. Our school infrastructure, no one knows better than you and your team, is crumbling. And this Education Sector Enhancement Program, too, was supposed to deliver repairs to primary schools, building of a secondary school, and a lot of the works that were desperately needed and remain desperately needed. The loan was for US $35 million. And as of December 29th, 2017, because of significant delays to the major infrastructure components of the program, because there were delays in completing designs and all kinds of other reasons, $31.4 million of that loan was canceled. That was in December 2017. Now, fortunately, we have re-engaged the bank on this matter, and they remain amenable to re-entering discussions to deliver some of this very important work. But the fact is that this is just another example of the non-execution of important resources and important works within the last administration that put us now in the position of having to really catch ourselves, as Bajans will say, to try and catch up to deliver on some of these things. My question is, what is your ministry doing to make sure that some of these very important programs, I know that you've had great success with Skills for the Future, but in particular some of the infrastructure works that require detailed designs and require very, very close management with respect to procurement, we have to make sure that there's efficiency and close oversight and very good governance. How are we going to make sure that this does not happen again?
Thank you, Member for St. Michael, South Central. I am so glad that you have raised this issue. It is a difficult one for me because I cannot believe that I've come to office and I've had to face within the Ministry of Education a scenario where significant funds could have been allocated to dealing with the infrastructure of our schools. And the last administration would have dropped the ball in relation to being able to make full access of those resources. Because every day I'm having to encounter environmental issues and issues related to our school plant that sometimes distracts us from being able to get down to the real issues that must face us in education and the things that need to be addressed. Now that said, obviously the dropping of the ball would have happened prior to my time, but immediately on coming to office, I would have recognized that there is a unit within the Ministry of Education, the Education Technical Management Unit, which has been responsible, I believe, from the days of EduTech, to be able to deal with a number of these large projects involving the loan funding. Now, I do not know how the former minister would have dealt with this issue in terms of that, what I consider the engine room of the Ministry of Education. But in the course of the last few weeks and months, it has been engaging the attention of certainly the Permanent Secretary, the Chief Education Officer, because I have taken the view that these projects are significant to the ability of the Ministry of Education to achieve its goals. Certainly, when the Ministry of Finance assists with the negotiation of these loans, it is imperative on us as the executing ministry to ensure that the projects are able to meet the time frame that is required. And really, we would not be scrambling right now to find resources if that had not been addressed under the previous administration. What we have been in discussions about is the reorganization of the Education Technical Management Unit. It is responsible for addressing certainly the issues in relation to the primary schools. It also, in terms of the domestic summer works program and any issues that arise in terms of maintenance, it is also responsible for the secondary schools and working with the school boards to ensure that various projects are done. But it is also responsible for the projects of which you speak. And in relation to that, I do believe that the resources that are needed for that unit have not been adequately supplied or expanded. I also believe that the minister, the reporting mechanism is usually to the permanent secretary, and the former permanent secretary would have been aware of the challenges, I believe, in relation to the project of which you speak. But we have been looking at how to reorganize the department so that not only is the PS aware of what is happening, but certainly the minister is also aware of what is happening. The system within the ministry is such that when concerns are raised in relation to school plans, those issues sometimes come through the chief education officer. I may get a message telling me there's a problem at a primary school or at a secondary school. But the ETMU department is actually responsible for the execution and the implementation of issues relating to the school plans. And therefore, unless it is drawn to the minister's attention sometimes, or to the permanent secretary's attention, or to the chief's attention, there have been challenges certainly in the past in relation to being able to address a number of issues. And again, I could not imagine how any minister could preside over a situation where he or she was not fully always appraised of the issues relating to the school plans or in relation to projects. And I have asked the department to, on a by monthly basis, to report to me in relation to any issues across the school system that arise, not just to the permanent secretary, but the minister must know, because under this process in the well, the minister is expected to know what is happening in relation to the school plan and in relation to the execution of projects. And no minister, no good minister, should have to face the public or to face his or her colleagues without a full appreciation of what it is that is transpiring in relation to every project within the ministry and every contractor who is engaged within the Ministry of Education. If that practice has been allowed before, it is one, I assure you, Minister, that I believe now must come to an end. And therefore, I intend to do all within my power to ensure that what would have obtained before in relation to a number of these projects would not be allowed to obtain again. If you would wish further clarity, I believe Mr. Harrison from the ETMU department can speak to specifically to that project, because I think the country is owed an explanation into what really happened as to why that project was allowed to be left wanting, in relation to what would have really transpired, so that the country can fully appreciate why we do not have the resources readily at our fingertips today in relation to being able to address a number of these issues. So, Mr. Harrison, if you can, come to the head table. Maybe you have to slip back. Yeah. One of you, so you can get it.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the House. This particular project...
Sorry, could you introduce yourself fully?
I'm sorry. My name is Richard Harrison, Director Acting of the Education Technical Management Unit of the Ministry. The unit has, as the Minister has said, responsibility for execution and maintenance of primary and nursery schools, and also the execution of other projects, very often physical works in their nature, although not strictly limited to physical works. This project, as Minister Cattle mentioned, was signed since 2012 and had a major physical works component to it. The central issue that caused the delay in the execution of the physical works was the procurement of the design consultants who would carry out the work. Now, this component is funded as counterpart funding to the loan, and the loan funds are not drawn down under the design of this project until you are actually executing physical works. So the reality was that until you have your design consultants in place and they carry out design work, and then you get on with the physical construction work, you're not using those loan funds. You are using your counterpart funds. Regrettably, with regard to the process of hiring the consultants, we ran into issues with the procurement process, which caused a number of delays in the way in which, or the progress towards finally awarding design consultants to do the work. Every effort was made to come to agreement with the respective department, the Central Purchasing Department, but we found issues that eventually had to be resolved through the cabinet. At this point, having awarded the consultants after a process of about 3 years, the budget for the current financial year has allowed us to bring the first designs for schools in the project, a design for a new secondary school and for 2 primary schools which are really in dire need of rebuild, particularly the Sir Elliot Belgrave Primary, formerly Bosco Bell, and the Belmont Primary School. The project really is intended to address major physical works that could not be addressed under the former sector enhancement project. And so 6 primary schools were slated for full rebuild, 2 for refurbishment, and with some possible expansion, and the design of and execution of a new secondary school. At this point, we're at the stage where we have the preliminary designs for the new secondary school and those 2 schools at a point where they could be approved to go to town planning. However, the budget for this particular financial year doesn't allow us to carry the designs further than this. The cabinet will need to review the project, and I believe that we're at the stage where that will happen so that the government can make a determination as to how it wants to go forward with the project in terms of its content, whether given time elapsed there will be any modification of the schools to be focused on, or other determinations made with regard to how the project is composed. Certainly, as Minister Cattle has said, the CDB is ready and willing to work with us to reshape, renegotiate a loan to facilitate the works. And I think the cabinet now needs to have the opportunity to review the whole project and its contents. I should say that the project also had a quality enhancement side, which, even though the physical works did not proceed, also was carried out in the meantime in terms of advancing new approaches to teacher effectiveness planning and so on in schools, and others with us here today can, if necessary, speak to that. But regrettably, the physical plant component of it, which was the major part of the loan, was stymied by unfortunate procurement issues.
Just a quick follow-up comment. I want to thank the Minister and Mr. Harrison for that response, and thank the Minister in particular for acknowledging that the level of oversight within the ministry must go beyond the unit itself. I believe the Planning and Priorities Committee, as a subcommittee of Cabinet, has been reestablished, and that is where, and as a committee chaired by the Prime Minister, that is where we will bring close forensic oversight to all of the projects in the public sector investment program, together with an increased responsibility by the Public Investment Unit of the Ministry of Economic Affairs to make sure that every single dollar and cent of these loan resources that the government of Barbados and the people of Barbados have to repay can be accounted for. So I thank the Minister for that response.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Madam Chair, Honourable Minister, I must say that perhaps as much as or more than anybody else, I am glad to see you back here where you truly belong. And as I've known you for many, many years, I can't wait for you to get back to full capacity. You know you're going to defeat this like you defeat everything else. Having said that, we had a discussion recently, and I raised my concern about the condition of some of the primary schools, in particular St. Bartholomew School, which seems to be the forgotten school in Christchurch. I had a distinct pleasure of going to the Blackman and Gollop School to do a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and I thought to myself, well, if this is the standard that the new schools are operating at, then there is a massive disparity between some of the newer primary schools, the plant and equipment, and some of the older ones. So I would like to know, Minister, what is your ministry's position on the upgrade, the urgent upgrade of some of these new primary schools? I'm not talking about taking them completely into the 21st century. I'm talking about basic things like proper toilet facilities, where the toilets are cracked, there are no toilet seats, the roof is dropping in, basic things that no student should have to go through. What's the ministry's position on that?
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Harrison because I just wanted to contextualize it again, that the ETMU unit is responsible for the execution of works within the primary school system. I must tell you that within the last 5 years, I believe, or thereabouts, I think there has been little or no reporting to certainly the Minister and certainly the PS in relation to the allocation of resources for the primary domestic school maintenance program. Again, on coming to office, I am now insisting that that no longer obtained, that again the Minister must be kept abreast of the state of the school plans, but also a discussion must take place with the Permanent Secretary, the Minister, the Chief Education Officer, and the officers within the ETMU unit in relation to the state of the plan and also being able to make a determination as to priorities. Because we must no longer be in a situation where these issues are raised in relation to the condition of the plant and the ministry is caught without an answer. Because a unit specifically has been vested with that responsibility. So I again give you the assurance that these issues, which I believe have fallen through the cracks over the past few years, will certainly be addressed. I know that the Prime Minister, I believe on Friday night, would have indicated a sum of 4 million, of which 2 million she was allocating to certainly the secondary schools in relation to helping us with dealing with the issue of bathroom facilities, because bathroom facilities are not just a problem in the primary school system, but it's also a problem at the secondary schools as well. And I know she has given me the assurance, because she too has heard me repeatedly echo the sentiments of my colleagues in relation to the school plants. plants and the condition of the school plants, that we need resources. It is regrettable that we lost the money from CDB, but again, there is hope and hope on the horizon that we can renegotiate and certainly within the foreseeable future be able to address a number of these issues. But specific to St. Bartholomew, I will let Mr. Harrison speak to that because that would have been under the ETM unit before, and I think he would have had some more intimate knowledge in dealing with the school.
Thanks, Minister. Prior to this meeting, we would have had what I would have to admit would be a late revelation to the Minister of the things, the projects that this unit would have on looking at things that have to be carried out during the summer, provided our recommended list of things to be executed. In the case of St. Bartholomew's, or rather, if I should say, I would go back to the point made by the Minister that the resources to the unit, I think both in terms of what have evolved as the demands on the unit and the things to be done are not quite matched. So we are grappling with pace of execution issues at the moment. And in regard to what would not be placed within a summer program, we try to fit that within the total budget given to ensure that ongoing response to regular issues arising, plumbing, vandalism, leaking roofs, that we can handle those things on a month-to-month basis in addition to what we undertake for the summer. The St. Bartholomew's one is certainly one that could fall within the summer program. We, however, do feel that this is one that does need attention. I think there's a prefab that has some repairs needed, and the bathroom area needs repairs, and we would like to do that as soon as possible. We envisage that this could happen in a sort of two-phase manner, which would not limit us or require that we wait until summer to execute it. So that is the recommendation with regard to this particular school. I should say also that given the nature of emerging urgency, shall we say, that it is practical for us also, notwithstanding the publication of a list such as this in terms of the summer program, that we do maintain some flexibility so that if indeed something of even greater urgency arises, we may have to redivert. But the way we have structured it, it gives us a certain leeway within the funds available over the course of the year to possibly respond to other urgencies. But the confession has to be made that in terms of the global budget annually allowed to this entire exercise, that we are and we have for some time worked within fairly constrained circumstances, and that choices have to be made along the way as to what can be accommodated within any particular year. And we are forced to postpone many things. So the fact is that we are really playing catch up, that there's a tremendous volume of maintenance outstanding and putting right that needs to take place. And unfortunately, the minister, much as she would wish, does not have the resources to really make great advances in terms of making up that deficit very immediately. It will take time, and we've got to continue to push to find ways to bring more resources to the sector. She spoke of the Prime Minister's decision to address the bathrooms at secondary schools. We trust that as the government proceeds, that additional resources may also be found, and also in terms of the capacity within the unit and the ministry's units that respond to this, to cope with a greater program so that greater progress can be made in really catching up with some of the deficits in terms of the condition of schools.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I am very, very, very concerned. A number of statements that were just made have made me even more concerned. One was the late revelation to the minister of certain issues. Now, I would like to think that I keep on top of my ministry, but I can only keep on top of my ministry if people come to me and tell me the things that should warrant my immediate attention. So, is there no program where routine inspections are done of schools? The problem at St. Bartholomew did not happen overnight. This is not something where something cracked and you're looking to do it in summer because there are redundancies and the children have another option. We have a problem with some of the schoolgirls getting infections because they're holding their business because they don't want to use the toilets in the primary schools. The St. Bartholomew bathroom is in a miserable and deplorable condition. That did not get there last year or the year before. That has been years of neglect. So, to me, if even the ministry's resources are scarce, it is up to the minister to make a decision as to what needs to be prioritized. But the minister can't know that or can't do that if she does not know. So, something like this where you have a crisis situation at a school, and it is a crisis, then the minister should be put in a position, I humbly suggest, where the facts are presented to her and then she can make a decision as to what is the priority and if it can wait. I would like to know, I guess at you, Mr. Harrison, because you're the person answering, right? I would like to know what provision is in place for the routine inspection and monitoring of the plan of the primary schools so that things like this don't happen. This is not a now situation. This has been years in the making.
Sir, the regular mechanism in place is that we have building maintenance supervisors who address 4 zones in the country, and each one of them has a responsibility for bringing to attention those things that are requiring work in their particular zone. I think the St. Bartholomew's matter is one which fell victim in part to the fact that the summer program, within a context of the global budget for the year, ended up being set aside given the challenges in dealing with the particular building. But no question, the conditions of which you speak need attention, and this is partly why I suggested that being aware of it, the effort to address it sooner rather than later is being worked on, and certainly it would not be one which we would wish to see remain the way it is. So the supervisors bring these things to attention, but given the challenges in dealing with this particular block, I think, and also other things that were put into summer programs in a couple of years before, this one ended up being sidelined. But the attention to this basic conditions in a bathroom, I would say to you, I agree, need to be given priority. And we certainly will continue to work to avoid situations where something like this does not get postponed interminably.
I don't want to belabor this point, and I think the question is not being entirely answered. Maybe the point of the question is being missed. So I'll be really, really specific, so there's no chance to miss this one. Mr. Harrison indicated that because of the summer program, sometimes things get deferred, and something might have been deferred from last year. The point I am making here, Madam Chair and Minister, is that this is not a deferral or a miss from last year. This is a sustained neglect of the school. I'm using this one because this is one that concerns me. So I was in the plant recently. I spoke to the principal, who assured me she had written a number of letters to the ministry outlining the plight. She took me into the bathroom and showed me, and to be honest, I needed to use the bathroom.
Sorry, honorable member, any other point? I think
yes,
you drove that home quite well.
No, the point is, I asked specifically what monitoring mechanisms are in place to keep abreast of what is going on in the schools. I heard that this one now is brought to attention is going to be addressed or whatnot. That's not my question. What monitoring mechanisms are in place to make sure that no schools fall through the cracks in relation to basic hygiene and basic things for the schools and for the children?
Thank you.
Children.
I think, as I said earlier, the challenge, and I think maybe I will have to say that really, as Minister alluded to, the response mechanism of the unit is currently very challenged with regard to the number of things out there. And I certainly concede to you, the circumstances you describe would suggest that whoever has clear understanding of these circumstances at the particular school at a particular time would say we have to do this ASAP, find a way. The reality at the moment is that the time with which, or the process of bringing priority items all to the fore and responding to them quickly is being challenged by the various things that we are addressing at the same time. And so this is not what we would wish. And I think with the minister's focus on the matter, that we are going to work through very shortly ways in which the process can be more efficient, the response can be quicker, and come to a situation where we don't have a representative feeling that a school in his area is really being neglected.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you, ma'am. And let me say good morning to all honourable members and our guests among us who are here today to discuss one of the most important ministries that will impact on the lives of Barbadians across the board. And I also want to welcome back Madam Minister, looking as sharp as ever. And she is sharp when she has to be with her professionalism, whether it be in the legal field or managing the education ministry, and I'm sure that her staff will be very accommodating in helping her to achieve the goals. The first thing, in the interest of time, I would want to refer to, ma'am, is associated with the reports that have come from the police, the public, and the prisons, the 3 Ps, within the last couple of months, and indeed we know that there were issues before as to what is happening with our children and what is happening in not only in the schools but the homes in particular. And we recognize that many of our children, particularly our boys, have been falling through the cracks. And I'm very proud to have heard Madam Minister speak of 10 nursery schools that have been established, thanks to the vision of the administration of which I was before 2008, because that is really the platform and the foundation for everything to do with human beings. However, if the nursery education is put in place, I am wondering then what is happening beyond the nursery and indeed beyond primary with our children. And it brings me to the point where I can speak with a measure of authority on those 6 or 7 schools that were identified by the police and other persons involved in crime, involved meaning a part of the crime prevention, where some of the same schools that were identified are the same schools that in the past taught everything to do with industrial arts or vocational skills. There was an exhibition called the Lumber Company Annual, I can't remember the name, but it's an industrial arts education exhibition and competition. And there is no school in Barbados that ever succeeded or went beyond those schools that were mentioned according to what the police have outlined. And I want to know what is happening, ma'am, in relation to the ministry, and if there's any plan for the ministry to re-establish a remedial reading and mathematics unit. Because if our boys are slower in developing, as we see how we have to cut the common entrances to school and lower the grades for boys so that they can get into the higher established schools according to what Barbadians are looking for. It says then that some of our boys are developing later. We cannot afford to leave them out there like loose cannons. And then a song by a well-known member in this honorable chamber called Johnny Maboy before, parents have to be asking how many more. And I want to find out, does the Ministry of Education have a plan to be able to speak to the country as to whether a special remedial unit will be established to look after the needs not only of the boys who are late developers, but the girls? And there are too many thousands of Barbadians who were late developers for whatever reason, whether it was death as a result of a parent, or if they were deprived of going to school, or whatever, and as a result of being able to get the exposure to reach that level, they have been able to succeed positively. I want to find out, ma'am, that's my first question, and I have two more that will be related. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Minister. Always welcome your interventions, given that you have a deep sense and understanding of the difficulties that we're facing in the system, and certainly a passion to make a difference in relation to young people in particular. I am mindful that there is a reading policy within the ministry, a document that I've discovered. It is over 10 years that anything has been done with this particular policy. Within the ministry, we've taken the position that it is now time for that policy to be revised, because a decade, I believe, has been lost, a generation has been lost in terms of the thrust that we should have seen in relation to continuing to improve literacy in the classrooms. The recommendation has certainly been made from within the ministry as well, that within the school plans that we have a dedicated reading room, and to be able to have specific resources, not just books, but certainly through the use of technology, where students can be able to learn and to read. As you rightly said, it is not just the boys that are having challenges, but I believe the girls are also having challenges, even if it is not as highlighted by the reports as we've been seeing. But certainly, I would have spoken in the opening to engagement with the Eardiston Training College and the approach that they are about to embark on, which would see us having a dedicated literacy intervention program at the Eardiston Training College. The focus of that program, Madam Chair, is to again address the deficiencies that we're seeing in relation to reading. The initial project is intended to set up a center where parents and also kids can actually come and be tested. The resources, I believe, they're seeking the resources through Skills for the Future program, and it would be grant funding, which would allow us, there's not a major set of resources in terms of initial output that is required, but the intention is that we will be able to use the premises at Eardiston, dedicate a specific space for the testing to be done, and also for the training of teachers to take place, who in turn will then also be able to train other teachers to be able to conduct testing. The intention also, ma'am, is to ensure that teachers can come to the facility at Eardiston Training College and also test children there themselves to be able to identify the challenges that they have in relation to reading. So we are mindful that
this is a burning issue. I think all of the reports, criminal justice, other reports, whether it comes from Edna Nichols, all speak to the issue of literacy and certainly numeracy being some of the deficits that our students are presenting with. Now, one of the interesting discussions that we had too recently was about teachers who complete the Earlston program and who are within the schools but believe that they're having challenges being able to teach English. And again, we've spoken to the principal at Earlston regarding addressing those deficits as well, because it is one thing to complete the program, but really a large part of what teachers must do is very practical. And so we have to make sure that the training that they're being given at the institution allows them not just to pass an exam, but also to be able, when they are in the school environment, to be able to use the skills that they have obtained to be able to assist the students to be able to learn to read as well.
Thank you, ma'am. My second question, ma'am, is associated with a project that the Ministry of Education would have been pursuing over a 5 or 6 year period. And it also tied in with a parliamentary question that was brought to this honorable chamber that has never been dealt with, to do with violence, bullying, children at risk. The Ministry of Education never favored this honorable chamber with any response, any report. I want to find out, ma'am, knowing that there was a consultant who was assigned to the Ministry of Education during 2013 to 2018, investigating, or I should say working with a Children at Risk and Bullying project, and annually over $90,000 for that consultant. I want to find out from the Honorable Minister or any of her team, because she's fairly new there, where the taxpayers' money has been spent, because we have not seen any formal report being given to this honorable chamber. Nobody has ever called on a calling program to say, I have seen the report, I've been blinded by it. I would like to know from the honorable minister through her team, how could it be available if there is one? And how could this honorable chamber, with all of us who are planning for the country and making sure that the accountability of the expenditure of the government's funds and the care for the children of Barbados is looked after in a comprehensive way, because to know the results, to know the recommendations that have been put in place, having found out why these children are behaving the way they do, and how such matters can be mitigated, has not been given to us. I'd like, please, through you, ma'am, to find out the status.
Thank you, Minister. I must tell you that on coming to office, I too became aware that a consultant had been engaged. I believe your figures are correct, about $7,500 a month for 6 years, approximately. I believe it was climaxing when I took up office in May, because I was alerted to it because I would have received invoices for payment. And I would at that point have queried the invoice, the sum, but I also queried at the time whether reports had been submitted by the consultant to the Ministry of Education and what engagement had taken place in relation to certainly student support services and secondary within the department. I was alarmed that the consultant reported to the minister directly. The payments, however, were made upon submission of an invoice to the permanent secretary in the ministry, but that the student support services, who I believe, and I must tell you there were reports that were submitted, the student support services and secondary departments, who I believe could have benefited and certainly have been engaged in discussions with the consultant, that process did not take place. And I was very alarmed at the fact that this money had been spent, but we were still seeing taking place across the school system, obviously, issues of violence, with our students. That said, ma'am, fortunately that contract came to an end on taking office, but I've taken the view that certainly we cannot do all within the Ministry of Education based on the resources. But I take note that there are several groups that exist and organizations that exist which can help to support us in addressing issues of violence and certainly counseling our young people, whether they are faith-based organizations, whether they are young groups of men or women prepared to mentor in some way and to guide our young people. And I've taken the position within the ministry that the Student Support Services Department must now engage those persons who are highly recommended across the educational system, providing services which may be able to help with the engagement that is required. Rather than having persons just entering the school system on an ad hoc basis, we have started the process of, I don't want to say interrogating, but more interviewing persons to be able to gain a better understanding of what services are being provided. And each of the entities who are seeking or who are already in the system have been asked to pay a visit to the Ministry of Education with a view to assessing for ourselves what services are being provided, whether there are things that we can do to strengthen the programs, and to have the Ministry of Education's officers play a more oversight role in relation to assisting us to address the needs that are obviously required to deal with issues of violence. I can't speak much more to the consultant or the contents of those reports in relation to the manner in which it was done and what was the intention of the minister in relation to bringing those reports to Parliament if that was the case. I am not in a position to speak to that. But I can tell you that those reports do exist. I believe for the most part they confirm, from what I have seen, what the statistics in the Criminal Justice Unit have spoken to, what I think most Barbadians already know in terms of the issues of violence, the causes of the socioeconomic factors which lead to students being violent. I think they address the issues of the deficiencies which are plaguing us in the primary system where students go undiagnosed, and that there are a lot of them that require anger management counseling. I think it addresses the issues that we are well aware of in relation to suspensions and the way in which discipline is administered within the system, which then results in students acting out in one way or the other. So I do feel the report spoke to, I think, and reinforced a lot of what we know. What, however, was my major criticism was that it then did not go on to address in any major way the solutions to the problems. And I think that is one of the major deficiencies that we have sometimes as a society, where we are quick to do reports, hire consultants, but in terms of the actual implementation and the execution of what is found in those reports, unfortunately we are found sadly wanting.
I know that about 25 years ago, there were some schools called composite schools, where little children, 5-year-olds and up, were running all over the place, among other children up to 16 and 17. Good Shepherd, St. Andrew's Primary Composite then, Holy Innocents Composite, St. Lawrence Composite, St. Giles, and I could go on to mention there were about 7. And as a result of recognizing that there was no proper curriculum for those children, who were really disorderly and rude, some of them, because they were bored. That was not their area of the academics. They wanted to get into the technical and vocational skills and using their hands. And a decision was made for those children who were scoring under 30% to be deferred from writing the exam from the regular primary schools. But then these children are here at 14 and 15. And another decision was made to establish a school that will cater specifically for those late developers as well. I am hurting today, ma'am, because poor people's children in Barbados are suffering because they are being pushed through the system, some of them, as though they're going through a conduit. So you go through that conduit that's made of whatever material, you go in and you come out the same way. And I saw over the probably almost 20 years now, a turnaround as a result of the establishment of a school called the Alma Parish School. And there's nothing that hurts me. And in Barbados, we are myopic, and sometimes some of us look at life in a way as it has to be for my party and my politics and nobody else. And as a result of closing that school 2 years ago, June, displacing hundreds of young people, when there is a history that the Alma Parish School had served those children and their families so well, and indeed the country by extension, because of their performance. I am hurting because we need another program, another Alma Parish School, to put the children from class 3 in a school to work program, because we found out they're into cosmetology, they're into boat building, baking, hospitality, and so on and so forth. Now that has been cut totally off, and our newer secondary schools are bursting at the seams because children are now put into those secondary schools where there's no specially designed program to accommodate them. And the Mount St. Vincent project, where teachers were trained to the master's degree level to be able to cater to the special needs, not only now meaning late developers or what we might call slow learners, but also gifted children. There were 40 teachers trained. Where in the system are they now? And how are they coping in a regular classroom, teaching regular children when millions of dollars were being invested in them? I want to find out if there's a plan by this ministry to develop another or to reestablish the Alma Parish School that we so need, that help to mitigate what we're seeing now out there in our society with all of the madness in crime and violence. And I'm not saying that those children have left there doing it, but I'm saying we can put systems in place to stymie that negativity. I want to know what's happening. If the ministry has a plan, I would be only too happy to help to identify to the Honorable Minister and to the Cabinet a location that is already ready-made, a primary school that would be available only if the school in the community will take others and it has the space, because catchment is important too. So a child from St. Philip should not be coming down there, one from St. Thomas. That will help to cater to those students who are in need of it because they're being left behind even in the newer secondary schools. I'd like Honorable Minister and her team, please, to give me an answer that will settle my heart tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'm not sure I will be able to settle your heart, because your heart is always pouncing.
You speak with it. You always speak with it.
But I must tell you, on coming to office, I did pay a site visit to the Alma Parish, or the former Alma Parish School. You're correct that the institution was closed. I think one of the challenges for me is that while I have since seen that the students were relocated to at least 3 specific secondary schools, specific institutions, and some were allocated to obtain skills as well at various institutions. I have not seen from the reports, and I have reviewed the expulsion and suspension reports, trying to track those individuals to see whether they have been the source of any engagement in any criminal activity, or certainly in relation to being troublemakers at school. I actually, so far, I've only found one individual who attended the Alma Parish School on the radar, being one of the students that was giving trouble and resulted in a suspension. But I do share your concerns, because it was one of the first questions I did speak to the Chief Education Officer about, in trying to inquire whether what we were seeing manifesting itself in the system was a set of students who had been displaced and who had been placed in institutions where the resources certainly were not adequate. Now, that being said, it does not mean that at some point things may not manifest themselves, or that they are not having challenges within the system, because I do feel that the fact that the entry requirement into the institution was what it was, it would suggest that those students would have benefited obviously from some remedial programs, first of all in the literacy and numeracy, and indeed being able to equip themselves to engage in obviously the skills that would have been available at the Alma Parish School. Again, I can't speak to the thinking that was behind its closure. I know there were considerations in terms of the location and in terms of whether students were traveling quite a fair distance to be able to get to the school. But from reading the former minister's comments, obviously the intention was to bring about closure within a short time frame, and I know resources were directed to other institutions in terms of the classrooms. All of the equipment, everything was redirected. The teachers were allocated to other institutions, and as I said before, 3 institutions are the ones where these students were certainly placed that were able to go into secondary school. That being said, the location at Alma Paris has presented some problems. There are some buildings on the premises which are no different to some of the other school plants. It will require significant injection of capital to be able to bring the plant to a suitable level for children and teachers certainly to be able to function. That has been one of the concerns, because while we would want to see the institution urgently put back into the market, that has been one of the issues that has certainly plagued us. I'm hoping that if we are able to obtain some funding through the program through CDB, that we can put that certainly as a high priority. What I will say, however, though, in the interim is that we have established a number of remedial units in a number of schools to be able to address some of the challenges where students obviously may not have met the academic qualification to get into the institution. But in terms of upgrading the skills that are in the institutions, again, that is high priority. A lot of the school plants that have a number of these programs, I know we have about 3 cosmetology units across the system right now, and in the newer secondary schools, there has been tremendous response to that, certainly. We have also looked at alternative exams as well for students who have had some of those challenges, so that instead of doing the traditional qualifications, that they're able to do City and Guilds, for instance, and we've been running some pilots through the assistance of UNICEF to be able to capture a generation of young people who I believe have skills in a different area, but who in the traditional system or the mainstream system would certainly have fallen through the cracks. So those are some of the things that are on stream, but I do share with you the concern in relation to Alma Paris, and as soon as we're in a position to have access to resources, that will certainly be one of the institutions that we would like to get back up and running.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Lucie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I must join in saying welcome back to my colleague, the Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast. My question today is rooted in one of your strategic goals to provide a wide range of higher education and training opportunities to enable those best able to avail themselves of those facilities to develop the professional, technical, vocational, and other skills they can use to further their careers and contribute to the development of the Barbadian economy. Under the last Barbados Labour Party administration, the establishment of what was then known as the University College of Barbados was had actually been proposed, but however was not realized after 2008 change of government. As I understand it, this facility was to provide some sort of was to bring together the 3 institutions we now have with a view of providing some sort of flexibility in terms of the setting of curriculum which more cater to the needs of the Barbadian society at that point in time. My first question to the Minister is there such a proposal still on the table? And if so, what are the plans where the ministry is concerned for such if there is such a facility really still on the table as far as the ministry is concerned?
You are perfectly correct, Minister. This issue of the amalgamation of the various institutions has been on the, well, it was on the front burner, certainly for Barbados Labour Party administration. It would appear as though it went on the back burner for the last administration. One of the things on coming to office, however, that I recognized was that before we can get back to a discussion on the amalgamation, it is important to first understand what the existing institutions are doing. And therefore, I have spent some time engaging the various heads of the institutions to make an assessment as to the way forward. Because what would have obtained when those reports had been written, there's a different dynamic that has now played out in relation to each of the institutions. A number of them are also grappling with the issue of resources. Just like these primary and the secondary schools and the nursery schools, we find ourselves in a situation where the resources, financial resources that should have been in place to improve these school plans, certainly we've seen the deterioration of that over the years. In terms of the overlap of some functions in relation to the technical and vocational, that now as a matter of urgency has to be addressed so that we don't have the duplicity of efforts being done. What is happening now is that there is an assessment being done to determine how do we amalgamate at this stage rather than what would have been on the table obviously previously. But it is obviously an area where there is likely to be a restructuring exercise. Each of the institutions, as you know, have been asked to cut resources presently to find efficiencies in the system. I don't think the timing right now is right for us to make that step without first being able to find those efficiencies in the system. And once we're able to do that, I think we can look at the pros and cons of being able to move forward with an amalgamation of the entities.
Thank you, Minister. I particularly asked that question because I find that almost at the end of every school year, and when persons are preparing for the new year, there's an issue with those persons. Not all students are academically inclined. A lot of them have technical skills and would like to go and further their studies in that regard, but there seems to be a problem and which has gone unresolved up to this point in time in terms of places. Many persons, many youngsters out there are often left out because there's not enough space, let's say at the polytechnic or other learning institutions, vocational training, for them to be able to get themselves certified, so to speak. What is the plan to address that?
If you take a step back for a minute, the issue in relation to the plant also brings to bear another issue in terms of the human resources and the financial resources to expand. And so each of the institutions are grappling with how to make the most out of what they have presently. I too, like you, came to office not understanding why it was that several of my constituents could not participate in programs at SJPI, Barbados Vocational. They had skills, they wanted to get onto the program, but there were not enough spaces. I felt as though they were being excluded for political reasons, as opposed to that they were being excluded because whether it was a case of space, whether it was a case of the resources that are available to pay staff, I've come now to realize that those are some of the challenges that we are facing. SJPI, for instance, offers a number of programs, but they too, in terms of their intake, there are limitations in terms of the space of the plant. They've been expanding, but there are still limitations because as you expand, you then still have to engage additional persons to be able to teach the programs. They have been looking, obviously, at extending the program hours, but that will require some negotiation too with unions because obviously we will be moving now into a different timing in terms of our hours. So those are things that are impacting on what we all recognize are alternatives to being able to offer the types of extended programs in the evenings to persons to be able to pursue these activities. So what I'm telling you is that
I'm a little bit more enlightened, I suppose, as to what the constraints may have been. I know that we have spoken to each of the institutions about trying to find savings so that we can improve, that more persons can apply. But as I said, there are challenges with expanding, particularly in the current climate at this point in time.
And so my final question, I haven't heard all that you've said. I am a bit confused with relation to having heard a previous administration speak about expansion at a piece of land south of the Darl Jordan Secondary School. And you have outlined the number of challenges that you have. Was there any space for this? Is there anything on any record in the ministry? Because I am now beginning to believe that my constituents were a kite, so to speak, was flown before my constituents and myself, because we were led to believe that there would have been expansion of the SJPTA. Just south of the Darl Jordan Secondary School, that college would be expanded to in the north of the island.
Esther, I think you're speaking about the Hope Project, which is a
not the Hope Project. The Hope Project is a different project further down.
Okay.
On 2 occasions, and I want to make, because I want the air cleared so that we, the residents of the north, in particular the good people of St. Lucie, will understand, that whether there was a plan by the ministry to expand the Samuel Jackman Prescott Technical Institute, as it is now known, where lands south of the immediate south of the Darl Jordan Secondary School were excavated on 2 occasions just prior to 2 elections before, and we're led to believe that the college is being expanded there and opportunities would come. So I just want some clarity on that, if there is anything within the ministry or not, or a kite was just being flown.
Well, Minister, what I will do is I will ask Dr. Rose, to join us at the head table to address your concerns. Yeah. Just say your name.
It's still morning, or is it afternoon yet?
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Rowe. I'm the director of the Higher Education Development Unit. I think the project being referred to was at Nestfield. I don't remember any excavation being done, but the project was conceptualized to, it was just a bush. The project was conceptualized to provide space for both UWI, actually not both, UWI all the way down to SJPI, to offer programs in the north. The idea was to create a space that would have some unique characteristics. I know there was a concerted effort to look at the arts and music for BCC offering in the north, for SJPI to be able to translate some of those programs being offered on campus now in the north, and the same was true for specialized programs that UWI would offer. I don't think there was any deliberate effort to drop the program, but that would have to be discussed with the current minister in terms of how we're going to move forward.
Thank you.
I hope that clarifies for you, Minister. I can't say that the former minister promised something that that did not come to fruition. What I can say, it sounds to me as though the plans were discussed, but certainly it has not come to my attention in terms of something that would be brought to cabinet, certainly for approval to continue.
It came across as though it was more than discussed. It was a lot further, but I realize now.
Well, that
based on what
former
was said,
minister
that
was
it
well known for making more of things than he needed to.
Thank you. No further questions.
Honourable member for St. Peter.
You know.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
The question, well, I have a couple of questions, and one of them was maybe partly answered as it relates to maintenance of plant. The perspective I wanted to come from, though, had to do with more day-to-day cleaning, even though I have a question specific to sub-program 283 under secondary schools, program 272, children at risk. But from my ministry's perspective, I start to get the impression that some basic cleaning, not talking about any loan funding or any grant schemes, basic cleaning that should be taking place at schools seems not to be happening, as in basic mopping, sweeping, cobwebbing, cleaning bathrooms, nothing that really should be the purview of a project unit. I'm getting the impression from the inspectors in the Ministry of Labour and Social Partnership Relations that some basic cleaning, stuff that you do at home on a weekly basis, is not happening or seems not to be happening in some of our school plant where children attend every day and where people are working, both teaching and non-teaching staff. And I'd really like to find out what is being done, because this is basic stuff. Human beings exist in these spaces, and basic cleaning that should be taking place to look after the health and welfare of the people who exist in those spaces for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, not happening. The next one had to do with the sub-program I mentioned earlier, and I note that the budgeted estimate for 2019-20 is almost $1 million, $938,000, compared to $639.7 revised estimate for 2018-2019. I want to find out, because the sub-program statement speaks to providing a facility for children who are at risk of suspension or expulsion from secondary school. I'm not sure what that means, and if this refers to Edna Nichols or if this is another program. I want to find out the reason. This is almost a 50% increase in the vote, and I just want to find out, given that under normal circumstances we'd be concerned about children at risk. In the current environment, we're even more concerned because of the nature, the changing nature of crime, it seems to me, in the society. So I wanted the second question to find out what that increase represented in terms of institution or programming.
Thank you, Minister. In relation to the issue of maintenance, you are perfectly correct, and I think all members of Parliament certainly share the same sentiments in relation to the particularly primary school plans. Not that it isn't taking place across secondary schools as well, but obviously secondary schools is under the ambit too of the school boards. As you would be well aware, we have had, as a result of the BERT program, to remove the general workers from several of the institutions. I know you're saying that you were talking about before the program, so let me just break it into two for you. Currently, we are obviously grappling with an issue in terms of human resources within the various school plants. I know that within the budgets of the primary schools, principals still have an allocation of resources to be able to get some things done on the premises. But what we've been looking at is a scenario where we may be able to offer some short-term maintenance contracts, being able to engage persons to be able to zone the areas across the schools so that individual operators are responsible for specific properties. One of the biggest challenges that we've been having is that when you are attempting to, say, cut the grass or do anything which is going to require students to be affected or teachers to be affected because they have respiratory illnesses. Those things, when you have persons engaged during the daytime, 5 days of the week, Monday to Friday, have been challenged and in some cases not done because obviously you have to make accommodation for respiratory illness. I think that the solution really, therefore, is to be able to have persons engaged certainly on Saturdays and Sundays to conduct a lot of those types of works in terms of the exterior of the plant. In relation to the day-to-day maintenance, we may have to have persons going in to assist, but again, those are things now that in terms of our resources, obviously we have been having some challenges with. And therefore, it is duly noted, but it is one that, as I said, the ministry has been having some challenges, and I've asked for instance, maintenance, a maintenance document to guide certainly the secondary schools who engage general workers, because the follow-through that you speak about in relation to the last administration certainly was not happening. You had a situation where you had workers, and in some cases, yes, they were good workers, but I think we all know, as in everything where there are good workers and there are bad workers, the same situation obtained within the maintenance of the school plants. There was also a lack of supervision and oversight from the administration as well, and this is something that I'm desperately trying to correct, where principals of institutions report to us challenges they may be having in terms of addressing these issues. Again, if I as minister or the Ministry of Education is not made aware of the challenges, then we often hold the stick for it, but you can often address what you know as well. I am not, at this stage, can ask Mr. Harrison to speak to it, but I believe the officers who visit in various institutions, they would obviously be taking note of what is transpiring across the school plants. Again, even though they may have been collecting information, I must tell you that my biggest peeve in the ministry is what is being done with the information. Because if you do not have a routine maintenance program where once information is gathered, it is acted on, there's really no point in the officers going to visit the respective schools. And regrettably, it is the closing of the gaps that as minister I have had to be doing over the course of the past few months. Yes, we have information that there are challenges in schools, but what do we do to address it? And that is the issue that has been confronting us, certainly with the limited resources that are available. We have also seen, on coming to office, that we have been responding to emergency cases, and it is something that I've told the ETMU unit must stop. Again, if you have information in relation to the state of the plant, there has to be a routine maintenance inspection of plants which is addressed. Because similar problems are presenting across the entire system, whether it is, as the minister said before, the bathrooms or the trees need trimming. People have to now take responsibility for actually getting the job done. I'll give you the example of what has been cropping up recently. A report may come in from a principal addressing the concern of the teachers and the parents in an institution. It comes to the chief education officer. It may be copied to me on some occasions, but the difficulty is in that report may address issues that the ETMU department may already be addressing. But there are some other issues that need to be addressed usually in the report, and there are things that may not be within the purview of the Ministry of Education specifically. For instance, if you take the issue of COWICH, the Ministry of Education does not have the equipment to remove COWICH on the surrounding premises of institutions. Therefore, it has to rely on the Ministry of Health. It has to rely on the Ministry of the Environment. And fortunately, I have colleagues who have been responding to my constant phone calls in relation to addressing these issues. Regrettably, and I really am apologizing to the country because I feel that people do not fully understand the magnitude of the issues we are dealing with, and I don't want any student or teacher or principal or administrator to be operating in the conditions in which they operate. But we have had a decade of a failure to act taking place at the highest level, and regrettably it has made its way down the system in some cases, where simple things like making a phone call and asking the Ministry of Health, have you followed through on X or Y? Because school is going to be disrupted for the next week if you do not address a particular problem. Many times, those things, the ball has been dropped in relation to those things. So I have been spending time trying to correct the deficiencies within the system where people have been, in a sense, allowed to drop the ball, or because the oversight was not there to make sure that instead of something reaching the newspapers before the ministry was able to address it, that we as a Ministry of Education was able to be on the front burner. I recently would have spoken to the Minister of the Environment in relation to a recognition that the ministry doesn't have the equipment, as I highlighted to you, and being able to work with him to identify through his ministry the resources to assist the schools in, first of all, we will identify the issues surrounding the school plant. So if there are gullies, if there are abandoned lots that are under the control of National Housing Corporation or any other entity, that we identify where the problems are, because obviously where there is bush, there's often rats. And we are asking them, and we have asked them, and they've started to cooperate with us, and I want to thank the Honourable Minister, the member for St. Michael East, for his cooperation in this regard, to assist us with a component of his budget, which, while not traditionally it would be dedicated towards community beautification and removal of bush, recognize that it is a twofold process here at play. We have to remove the accumulation of bush for residents, but we also have a responsibility to protect our school environment as well. So we started to do the cleanups across the country. We started this weekend with 3 institutions, the Ann Hill School, the Irving Wilson, and the Wilkie Cumberbatch School. In the previous weeks, there would have been assistance given in relation to Kawich at the Blackman and Gollop School by the same ministry. I want the public to appreciate that there has been a decade of inertia, implementation deficit. We've said it in this chamber repeatedly, and it has to stop. Where these things are highlighted, we are addressing them, but it will take time because it requires now a new energy to be brought to the fore where people realize that files and paperwork can no longer sit on your desk. If there is something that needs to be addressed, pick up the phone and call the other ministry so that we can address it. And the final point I want to make, Minister, is that the issue of communication as well has really, in a sense, hurt the Ministry of Education, and indeed has hurt the relationship with the public as it relates to a lot of these environmental issues. And I say that because sometimes the work being done by ETMU in relation to cleaning the facilities needs to be circulated to parents and to the teachers in the institution in a more timely manner so that people appreciate what work is being done. Because sometimes works have gone on the weekend when no one is there, but oftentimes that communication has not been disseminated to the parents or to the teachers. So if you take the issue with the Milton Lynch that is making the headlines, work had been started over the weekend in relation to power washing of the premises. As to whether the work was done in the most effective manner may be questionable. But at this stage, work was started, and I am aware of a schedule to continue to do those works in relation to the school. So it may not be a fair criticism to say the ministry is doing nothing. What I think may be fair is to say if there are concerns that the work may not have been done satisfactorily. But I think we have to step back a bit and realize that people now need to be energized to get the job done and to do whatever it is that is required to get the job done.
The second question had to do with the vote under, I don't remember the sub-program, but it had to do with children at risk. Sub-program 0283 under secondary schools 272, program 272.
Okay. Right. Minister, my understanding is when I look at the personal emoluments that the amount that has been budgeted, it states 231,587 in the revised estimates, but that figure should actually have been 429,428. So that is a correction that will need to be made.
The revised estimates for 2018-19?
2018-19 should actually read 429,428.
Oh, okay. So that's an adjustment to be made.
Yeah. So it would for 2019-2020, the figure would remain the same.
Okay. And then therefore would be
So I do
comparable.
apologize. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I know. Yeah, it's true.
Honourable Member for St. John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, let me add my voice to all of the honorable members and welcome back, Minister. I want to start with a statement similar to that of the honorable member for Christchurch East and St. Peter. The plant at St. John's Primary is in a dire state of disrepair. I mean, it is really, really quite awful. And I think that, you know, some interest should be paid to that particular location. My question is related to sub-program 028. One of my questions, I should say, Madam Chair, skills for the future. This particular program seemed to be revolving around HIV and AIDS. In another life, I had a program at two of the schools in my zone at the time that looked at transitioning from class 4 to the secondary school. And I'm wondering if this particular program cannot be expanded to include things like anger management and conflict resolution, because the document mainly speaks to HIV and AIDS.
I think there may be some confusion, Minister. Skills for the Future does not relate specifically to that. I think that was, again, a typo, not done by the Ministry of Education. I must mention that, because it does say to provide funds for the formation, education, and communication program aimed to raise the level of awareness of HIV/AIDS. That is not associated with this program at all.
So it's not?
No, that's incorrect. That's a typo.
Okay. All right.
The Skills for the Future program, which is an IDB-funded program, that actually relates to the provision there is for the payment of consultant officers, auditors, consultants, and the costs associated with the upgrading of the computer lab at the SJPI and the Barbados Community College.
Right. So you're saying there's a mistake in the document?
Yeah.
Okay, got you. All right, sub-program 0425, Employment Training Fund. Can you explain exactly what this is, and if I'm thinking what it is this something that can be decentralized?
I will ask Mr. Eastman if he can join us at the table to just address your question.
Henderson Eastman, Executive Director, TVET Council. The Employment Training Fund is funded from the training levy. The training levy is paid into national insurance, 0.5% from the employer, 0.5% from each employee, 1% levy. We don't get the total funds. Over the last couple of years, we've been spending about $1 million, plus or minus. And I think we went to a high point in 2007 with about $3 million. Of course, we get much more claims than that. But it funds training grants to employers and training institutions in conjunction with employers for training. This year, we have been awarded roughly the same, $1.1 million. We have seen a strange event that we didn't have much applications this year. I don't know if it's because of what is happening, but you know, when there are hard times, people usually don't invest in a lot of training. So just over $1 million we spent.
My final question is related to sub-program 0568, the Media Resource Department. I remember the last time that we were in government, this particular program was very, very active in terms of providing information at primary school level. Now, unless that I am missing something, I really am not seeing any programs coming from this particular department in the 3 schools in St. John.
So I am asking what is the current situation of that particular sub-program.
I think you feel my pain then, Minister, because I too came to office and the Media Resource Department indicated that they were focusing on resources for teachers to assist them within these schools. I felt, however, that there needed to be an extension of what was created and the effort that was being made to do various things within the schools to assist teachers, and that should also extend to what happens when children come home on afternoons. They should be able to see videos online and continue the educational experience that resulted from within the classroom environment as a result of those tools that were created. So I have given the directive to the officers to start to create content in a way that allows a child, having been introduced to various characters, in some cases that have been created by that particular department, to continue the learning process after school. So instead of us having our kids engaged by characters that are foreign, I think we have to start creating characters to which they can relate, to be able to tell our story, to be able to impart certain morals and certain values through things and persons that look like them and that they can relate to as well, within a Barbadian setting, using the experience and the technical skills that the staff have. And I've started to shift the direction and the thinking because I do feel that learning is not something that just takes place in the classroom environment, but learning actually goes on after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so the same way that a parent will give a child a tablet to look at Dora or SpongeBob, we have to not only be stimulating creativity from our creators for the classroom, but we have to create that stimulation for them to create content for after school as well. And I must tell you as well that I discovered that there was a radio station that had been, well, let me go back. There was a license granted under the last administration for a radio station before they left office. I was very excited by the prospect that a radio station could play in relation to the role and educating through the Ministry of Education. And I have also directed them to focus on content that can educate the public about the things that are happening in education. We've met with the various tertiary institutions, advised them of the direction in which we're going, secondary as well and primary. They're very excited for a forum dedicated to education. I believe it can be the vehicle through which even a lot of our talent will have the opportunity, once the recordings are of a particular quality, to be showcased. And certainly it will also serve as a vehicle for the Barbados Community College to be able to use the facility to help them with programming and to help young people to be able to develop their skills in terms of radio skills, emceeing, interviewing techniques as well. So I must give you the assurance that while the focus may not be the same as it was previous years ago, I have tried to change the focus somewhat to have a more modern-day approach to technology and certainly to be more relevant to young people. We want our young people, and certainly students in particular, to be able to feel that they have an outlet, a radio station too, that they can claim as their own. A young student who is into music, for instance, is very unlikely to get his song played on mainstream radio. A young student who may be interested in DJing may not get the opportunity to go into the mainstream radio stations to be able to show off his or her skills. A young person preparing for an event may not get the opportunity to be interviewed or to learn the techniques for interviewing. But by having a resource such as this, the potential is there for us to be able to use this facility to benefit from the youngest child to the ones in tertiary as well. We've also looked at partnering with the National Cultural Foundation as well in relation to the studio that they have available to them also, to see if that is another opportunity available to us to be able to utilize, to train, and to expose our young people to that environment, because they're not going to be able to do it in the traditional environment. But I think having had that type of facility constructed through the last administration, I think we now have to be able to put it to use in conjunction with the one that we have available to us as well. So we're upgrading that component of it. We're seeing it as a facility now that will be able to get our message out there, and we have invested in the equipment to facilitate that process to happen. What we, however, must now move towards, and my PS knows that I have been requesting this for some time, is that we need to now have someone who can handle the content and the management of the station, because it isn't sufficient for us to just invest or to have the resource, but we need to have persons with the capacity to be able to manage and to really make that facility a reality. So I assure you that the players in education are excited by the prospect of it, and I hope that it will be able to serve a purpose to the residents of St. John as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I beg that you do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again.
Question is that I do now report to the Honourable Speaker progress and ask for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported progress and has humbly requested leave to sit again. All member for St. James North.
Your Honor, I beg that this sitting be suspended for lunch until 2:30.
The question is that this honorable chairman be suspended until 2:30 p.m. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber is suspended until 2:30 p.m.